What's shaking, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Shay and I cannot believe that it is time to do my January 2023 TBR. For the past 2 years, I feel like I have had a pretty mediocre reading year, so I decided to change it up a little bit. Here's how I'm hoping to do my TBRs in the year of 2023. I have these 4 jars right here, and so how this is going to go is I'm going to roll a 6-sided dice, and I am going to pick whatever I choose out of this jar. So I'll roll the dice, I'll choose out of this jar, I'll roll the dice, I'll choose that number out of this, and so forth with each jar. So the maximum number with a 6-sided die I can get with 4 jar is 24 books. You might think, that Shay, that's ridiculous. You can't read 24 books in a month. You are exactly correct. But I'm not holding myself to this. I used to be a reader that could just, yeah, I want to read this series, or this series sounds good, and just kind of make a list of books I wanted to read, and I would just tick off the list. And as my reading career gets further, it's just farther from that I have become. I am just at this point really overwhelmed with the whole amount of books that I have that I'm interested in, whatever. There are too many books out there for me to just decide what I'm going to read this month. So I need a little bit of help. I'm going to be picking books out of these jars. So the max is 24 books. However, I'm only going to hold myself accountable for reading 1 out of each jar. So that's only 4 books. But it helps me narrow down the possibilities of books that I can read so that these books I can pick from. I would like to get at least 10 books out of these jars. So if I roll and I get less than 10 books, I will spin a wheel that will tell me which jar I will have to get I have to roll again for and pull additional books out of, if that makes any sense. And as we get going, you'll kind of see what I mean. So let's talk about the jars real quick. I have my series jar, and it doesn't have a lot in there right now because I'd say it has like 12 or so series, because that's all that I have, which is fantastic. But as I read, you know, I will add series because I'll be starting series. It will go in this jar. So I have my series jar. The next is new releases jar. So I recently did a video about all the January releases that I was excited for, and all of those books are in the jar, and once February hits, I will add February releases into the jar, and I will pick books out of here, and all of these will be 2023 releases. Then I have all of my owned books, and there's about 160 books in here. This includes my physical TBR, my audiobook TBR, and my Kindle TBR that I own. So 160 books, and this is the biggest jar with almost 450 books in it, and that's backlist books that I do not own. These are all books that I'm interested in some way, shape, or form, but I just don't own them for whatever reason, because obviously I can't own every book in the world. But that's what we'll do, and I will start out by doing this on my phone instead of rolling an actual dice. I have a dice app. That's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna get started. And I'm gonna do Siri, and I'm gonna do it in this order. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the tops off. I think this will broaden my horizons. I will tell you, in this backlist jar, most of the genres in here are, of course, can be fantasy, sci-fi, romance, mystery, thriller, and horror, with a little bit other genres sprinkled in. I am going to screen record, and I'm going to get my dice app up. Here we go. 1. So 1 sequel. Let's pick out what series that I'm going to continue with. Let me just... Okay. Rhyria Revelations, which is interesting because I did actually just read the next one in the cycle, which was in December, which is interesting. And I will come back at the end and tell you about all these books. So I'm going to stick this back in here because the Rhyria Revelations is not complete yet. We're going to stick that in there. So Rhyria Revelations. Now for our new releases. 1 again. I love it. I keep forgetting to hold up the jar. That is gonna be the Stolen Heir. So it looks like I will be reading some Holly Black. So I'm gonna take this out of the jar and set it up here. Okay. And here we are for owned books. 4. So finally I get something larger than 1. So the first one is Empire of the Vampire. Perfect. That's huge. That's 1. The Crown of Gilded Bones. No. So if I pull, I think that, I don't know if the Crown of Gilded Bones is the next one in the series, but that's also a chunky book. Yes, I know it's a sequel, and the sequels that I own are in both the series jar and in here. So I will, honestly pick more series to continue on. It gives me a higher chance. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Okay. I don't know if y'all saw that, but... And last one. This is shaping up to be an interesting jar of picks. And this is The Rage of Dragons. Okay. What an interesting amount of books that we are coming to. Let's go and pick out of the backlist. 4 again. So I'm going to have right at 10 books, which is fantastic. It's from backlist. And this, I know I'm going to have books coming out everywhere because these are so tiny, because I had to make them so tiny to fit in the jar. This is Beyond the Ruby Veil. I can't remember, by Mara Fitzgerald. I think that is a fantasy. This is Witchmark. I think that's by C.J. Polk. I think. The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. And this is, Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Just to recap, this is some crazy books here. I picked out of the series jar the next book in the Right Area Revelations, which would start the bind up of Era of Navron for me, and that's going to be called Wintertide. And this follows the series. This would be the 5th book in the series, and it basically follows our heroes Royce and Hadrian as they save the world. And I love them as characters, and I really do want to continue on. If I choose to read this, I only have 1 book left after this. The next new release that I got is The Stolen Heir by Holly Black, and I liked the Cruel Prince series. I didn't read the Book of Night because it got terrible reviews. It is in these jars though, because I do own it, but I liked the Cruel Prince series, so I am looking forward to continuing on with this kind of companion series about Oak, which is Jude's brother. Out of the owned books, I got several. So, of course, I pulled the big chunker, Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff, and that's kind of what's so great about these jars, because I would have never picked up Empire of the Vampire just because it's intimidating, okay? So I have, like, in these jars, a ton of books that are 1,000+ pages, and so the whole process of that for me is to try to read intimidating books, even though I don't usually reach for them just because they're intimidating. So I'm not quite sure what Empire of the Vampire is about, and I don't support J. Kristoff as an author. I've heard he's done some really bad things, but I already owned this book. So, from Holy Cup comes Holy Light. The faithful hand sets worlds aright, and in the 7 martyrs' sight, mere man shall end this endless night. It has been 27 long years since the last sunrise. For nearly 3 decades, vampires have waged war against humanity, building their eternal empire even as they tear down our own. It's going to be about vampires. Another book that I pulled from my own books is going to be The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I have been excited to read this. Yes, I still have the sticker on, you know me. A warm and uplifting novel about an isolated witch whose opportunity to embrace a quirky new family and a new love changes the course of her life. I have heard nothing but great things about this book, and I am happy that I pulled this one out of the jar because I've been wanting to read it for quite some time. The next book that I pulled that I own is going to be Rage of Dragons, and this is by Evan Winter, and I know much about it. I know that our main character is Tau, and there's been wars and wars and wars, and it's his revenge story. And there's a lot of training montages in it. But it's an epic fantasy. I know a lot of people who love this book. I also know a lot of people who hate this book. So I will kind of see if I'm like the deciding factor. So we will see about that. I own it on my Kindle. I don't own it physically. The next book that I pulled for owned books is going to be The Crown of Gilded Bones, which is also in my sequel jar. And I literally almost thought about DNFing this series. But I was like, no, but I own a whole thing. So I'm going to give this one book a try. I don't know if The Crown of Gilded Bones is the next one or it's the fourth one. I don't know. I'm going to read whatever the next one in the series is, and this series starts with From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And I thoroughly enjoyed Blood and Ash, but I just did not like the second book. I thought it was worthless, useless, like had no use to the story. Then we pulled some backlist books, and we pulled Witchmark by C.L. Polk. It's an addictive fantasy that combines intrigue, magic, betrayal, and romance. I think it's a historical fantasy romance, and it is queer, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is. And then we have The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson, and that is a Carrie retelling. And I honestly have never even read a Carrie by Stephen King, so I don't know if it will be great for me. I've heard multiple people say that if you've read Carrie by Stephen King, it will disappoint, but the people that never read Carrie by Stephen King love the book. So I'm interested to see where I fall on that one. The next one is Beyond the Ruby Veil by Mara Fitzgerald, and it is also a dark queer YA fantasy. Emanuela Ragno kills the one person in Achaea who can create water. She must find a way to save her city from dying of thirst. This book doesn't have the best reviews, but the people that love it really love it. And so that's why I put it on here, because sometimes I like quirky things. And then the last book I got is a classic sci-fi, and I've been wanting to get sci-fi this year, so what better way to start with a classic, and that's going to be Foundation by Isaac Asimov. And for 12,000 years, the Galactic Empire has ruled supreme, and now it is dying. But only Harry Seldon, creator of the revolutionary science of psychohistory, can see into the future, to a dark age of ignorance, barbarism, warfare that will last 30,000 years. I am excited, and this is a long series, but several people love it, and I can't wait to get started. So these are all the books that I pulled. These are my piles of possibility. This does not mean that I will read these books, of course, but I am going to say that there are 2 books on this list that I have to read. If I don't read them, I will talk about a punishment next month, but I'm hoping to read it. So I'm holding myself to reading 1 book from each jar that I pulled. So my series, I only pulled 1 book. That's The Wintertide Rare Revelations, which means I will be reading that book in January. For new releases, I pulled Stolen Air by Holly Black, and I will be reading that one in January. My own books, I have to read 1 out of the books that I picked, and the same for my backlist. That gives me a lot of room to add books that I may want to read, or that I try to fit into challenges, or whatever have you. Or I can read these books that I've pulled here. I read an average of about 10 to 15 books a month, and so I have to read 4 from this TBR, and then I can either I can pull books off this TBR that I have created, or I can read books that aren't on my TBR. I think this is a very interesting list of books, some books that I would never have chosen for myself right here in January of 2023. I can tell you that I do plan on reading more new releases than The Stolen Air this month in January, because I want to read more new releases to stay on top of things. But as you can see, I also have a lot of backlist books that I can get to, and sometimes it gets overwhelming. But hopefully this will help me pare down some of these books. Maybe I'll DNF it, maybe I'll do whatever. More DNFing in 2023 for sure. I am hoping that doing my TBR this way will help me choose the books that I read and help me find kind of what my reading goal and reading taste is. And I'm excited about some of these books, and we will see how I do when I do my January wrap up. Okay, tell me what you think about these books. If you have read them, which ones do you recommend? Tell me what you're reading in January. I will catch you guys later.